And welcome back. It's Jason Walter here, and here's your latest housing market update. And here's a headline that really caught my attention that I actually just noticed today. It says pending home sales rise for the first time in 14 months. This is based on a report from Redfin that actually goes over what happened in December in our US housing market. So let's go ahead and dive right in. It says pending home sales increased 3% in December from the month prior to that. The first monthly gain since October of 2021. It's pretty wild to think that we hadn't had a gain in pending home sales on a monthly basis since October of 2021. It says here, but home sellers remain on the sidelines with new listings posted their biggest annual drop since the start of this pandemic. So we're kind of seeing this a tug and pull amongst buyers and sellers right now. Pendings did increase slightly from November through December 2022, but still down big time compared to 12 months ago. Meanwhile, home sellers are more reluctant to list their homes for sale, given the fact that our housing market has cooled off, and of course, people don't want to give up their historically low rate. Now, having said that, even though pending home sales have been decreasing year over year, the decline of contracts being signed actually eased for the first time in 10 months. So the year-over-year decrease in pendings decreased by 30.9% this December, or last December, compared to the record drop of 35.1% in November. Meanwhile, closed home sales fell 33% from 1 year ago, but that drop also eased from the record low of a 35% decline in November. So not a lot of change between November and December regarding closed home sales. It went from about 35% decline down to about 33% from a year ago. And obviously it makes sense that we're seeing huge decreases of closed home sales in December last year compared to December 2021. Back in December 2021, average rates were around 3%. And back in December 2022, average rates were around 6%. Of course, when I mean average rates, I'm talking about average mortgage rates, right? Additionally, new listings fell 26.8% year over year in December, the most since the onset of the pandemic. And here's a high-level overview regarding month-to-month changes as well as year-over-year changes for a number of different metrics here. And stay tuned as well because I'm going to be sharing some charts to share how the numbers we're seeing right now compared to years past, going back to approximately 2012, 2015, which actually will kind of make sense when talking about the numbers here. So the median sold price in the US is at $388,100 for December 2022. And that's a slight 1.4% decrease compared to November, but up 1.2% compared to December 2021. So the median sold price has only increased by 1.2% over the past 12 months. Meanwhile, pending home sales on a seasonally adjusted rate here increased 2.9% compared to November, but still down a whopping 30.9% from December 2021. Meanwhile, closed home sales decreased compared to November, and also a giant decrease of 33.3% compared to 12 months ago. New listings again down month to month as well as year over year. So we're not seeing an increase of new listings, even though active listing inventory has been increasing. As you can see right here, it says all homes for sale, seasonally adjusted, 1.6 million. It doesn't really tell us what this actually means, but I believe what they're talking about here is active listings, in other words, houses for sale, plus pending home sales at 1.6 million. An increase of 11.9% year over year. Meanwhile, the month supply is only 2.3% this last December. 1 year ago, the month supply was only 1 month. So we went from 1 month to 2.3 months in 1 year. Also, the median days in the market is at 44 days right now, meaning it's taken approximately 44 days to sell a house, at least for December, and that's 19 days longer compared to a year ago. So this means that it's taking nearly 3 weeks longer to sell a house in December compared to December 2021. Also, for the share of price drops, according to Redfin here, which I'm just kind of scratching my head here, 14.6% of all houses for sale in December have reduced their asking prices. I mentioned that I'm scratching my head because according to altosresearch.com, the share of price drops nationwide is around 40% this last December but Redfin's reporting that share at 14.6%. If you guys know why there's such a big discrepancy, 14.6% compared to 40% per altosresearch.com, then please leave me a comment below. Meanwhile, for December, approximately 23% of houses that sold above the seller's final asking price. This actually means that 1 year ago, that ratio there was approximately 43%. So back in December 2021, approximately 43% of houses that sold above the seller's final asking price, whereas this December, that ratio was 23%. Also, the average sale price to final list price ratio was 98%. Meaning homes that were selling for about 2% below the seller's final list price. 1 year ago, houses on average were selling for over the seller's asking price, or just over. And here's a new one, the share of offers written by Redfin agents in which they face competition, which, by the way, they define competition in which they actually faced another competing offer. So at least 2 offers received for a house for sale. So approximately 42% of the time, Redfin agents face other competition amongst other home buyers. 42% of the time in December 2022. 1 year ago, though, that ratio was 68%. It went from 68% to 42% this December. Now, here's a new one as well. Approximately 16.5% of all pending home sales this last December fell out of contract, meaning the home buyer canceled the contract 16.5% of the time. And of course, the main reason why we're seeing this huge decrease of closed home sales and our housing market slowing down big time as well is because of this right here. Average rates for December for a 30-year fix is at 6.36%. 1 year ago, rates average around 3% for a 30-year fix. In other words, rates more or less doubled over the past 12 months, causing our housing market to slow down big time here. Redfin also provides some metro level highlights as well for December. And this is based on 90 US metros with populations of at least 750 people here. So home sales. In San Jose, pending home sales rose 21% month over month on a seasonally adjusted basis, more than any other metro. That's pretty wild. An increase of 21% in one single month regarding contracts being signed between buyers and sellers in San Jose, California. On a year-over-year basis, only one metro out of these 90 metros saw an increase in pending home sales. That was actually in San Francisco, an increase of 2.4%. In contrast, though, the biggest decliners were Boise, Idaho, a giant decrease of 77.5% in contracts being signed compared to 1 year ago. That was followed by Baton Rouge, Louisiana, down 65.5%, and New Orleans down almost 53%. Meanwhile, approximately 26 metros out of these 90 metros posted decreases in the median sold price in the US on a year-over-year basis. Leading the nation was actually in San Francisco, down 11.4% compared to December of 2021. In contrast, though, the biggest increases in the median sold price on a year-over-year basis were actually in Greensboro, North Carolina, an increase of 15.2%, El Paso, Texas, an increase of almost 13%, Rochester, New York at 12.2%, Omaha, Nebraska, 10.4% increase, and Nashville, Tennessee, an increase of almost 10% on a year-over-year basis. Also, new listings fell the most from a year ago in Boise, down 57.4%, Greensboro down 52.2%, and big decreases in Tacoma, Washington, Seattle, as well as Stockton, California. In regards to housing supply, active listings, in other words, the number of houses for sale, rose the most from a year ago in Northport, Florida. So active listings increased 79.5% from 12 months ago in Northport, Florida. An increase of 59.5% in Seattle, and big gains in Nashville, Tennessee, Tampa, Florida, as well as Fort Worth, Texas, an increase of 48.1%. In contrast, though, they fell the most in Greensboro, down 28.4%, followed by Milwaukee, Hartford, Connecticut, Bridgeport, Connecticut, as well as New Haven, Connecticut as well. Interesting to see that 3 of the top 5 cities that posted biggest decreases in active listings were actually posted in Connecticut here. All right, now I want to share some slides with you guys regarding the metrics we just talked about here. Because remember when I said that pending home sales increased for the first time in 14 months? Here's a chart showing just that, which is kind of laughable here because look at this tiny increase of contracts being signed on a month-to-month basis. But still, historically speaking, the huge year-over-year decreases we're seeing right now, again, down 30.9%, which is really more or less on par with the early parts of this pandemic when our nation was more or less on lockdown. So this increase of 2.9% on a month-to-month basis is really not telling us the full story here because we're still at very low levels, especially compared to 2019 through 2013. So the big question here, of course, is this a sign that our housing market is starting to heat up? I would say it's a little bit too early to tell because this small increase really is a giant decrease compared to 1 year ago. And also the current levels we have right now are very low regarding contracts being signed between buyers and sellers. So, early parts of this process here, I'll definitely keep you posted because a lot could change. So home sales, again, down 33.3%. But again, the year-over-year change is actually worse than the onset pandemic here. A very small increase we saw in December compared to November, but still at very low levels, at least on a year-over-year basis here. Same goes for home prices. Home prices rose only 1.2% on a year-over-year basis this December, drastically different compared to spring months of 2021, where we saw a gain of 26.1% compared to the prior 12-month period. And here's a graphic showing the number of new listings compared to the past 10 years here. And these are year-over-year changes here. So again, a decrease of 26.8%, and new listings have been decreasing on a year-over-year basis really ever since the first part of 2022. Here's also the year-over-year change in active listings in the US on a seasonally adjusted basis here, an increase of 11.9% compared to 1 year ago, which is obviously a giant increase compared to 2021, where we basically more or less hit rock bottom, down 25% compared to the previous 12-month period here. But ever since then, a giant increase of active listings in the US. Also, in regards to how fast or how slow houses are selling in the US, days on the market is at 44 days for December, which is more or less on par with the early parts of 2020. So days in the market is more or less on par with pre-COVID levels back in early 2020. It's also kind of interesting to see that days in the market more or less peaks every December and January each year. So in the winter months, days in the market is the highest point, and obviously the lowest point is more or less the spring and summer months each year. So when looking at this graphic right here at 44 days, going back to January 2020, I would say December 2019-ish, days in the market was actually over 50 days. Also the same for 2019. So days in the market, even though it's much higher compared to the past few years, it's actually still below the time frame in 2019 and also 2018 as well. Here's a pretty wild stat as well, because only 23% of houses that sold in December sold over the seller's final asking price. But back in the spring months of 2022, which is an absolutely insane market, back in spring 2022, that ratio there was just under 60%. So on average, nearly 60% of the time, houses were selling over the seller's final asking price. Now it's only 23%. Here's another metric that's been absolutely tanking ever since the spring months of 2022. The average sale price to final list price ratio at 98%, meaning houses were selling for about 2% below asking this last December. But back in the early parts of 2022, houses were selling for about 3% over asking. Now again, selling for about 2% below. Also at 98.1%, this is more or less on par with January of 2020. Interesting enough though, that even though we're on par with January 2020, the current levels right now is actually higher than 2019 and more or less on par with 2018 as well. Also in December, approximately 16.5% of all houses fell out of contract this December at 16.5%. This is actually a little bit below levels in the last half of 2022, but at 16.5%, this is more or less on par, or actually a little bit less than the peak we had in the early parts of 2020, when the ratio there was around 17 or 16%. It's also worth noting here that at 16.5% of houses that fell out of escrow here, this is actually much higher compared to pre-COVID levels, because back in 2017 through the early parts of 2020, I'll just say January 2020, the ratio here was around 12 to 13%, obviously much lower than the 16.5% we're seeing this December. Also, check this out, because what a difference 1 year makes. In Austin, Texas, at 13.9%, that was the share of Redfin offers that face competition. Again, receiving at least one competing bid only 13.9% of the time this December. Last year, that ratio was 57.2%. And by the way, this is the lowest share in the 34 metros that Redfin tracked here. At 13.9%, the lowest ratio amongst those 34 metros, and much different compared to 1 year ago at 57.2%. So a lack of competition for people looking to buy a house in Austin, Texas. In Orlando, Florida, that ratio is 20% compared to 55% 12 months ago. San Antonio, Texas, also at 20%, and 53% of offers face competition in December 2021. Phoenix at 21%. It was at 48% 1 year ago. Miami, Florida, also at 21.7% compared to almost 49% 1 year ago. And the list goes on and on here. Sacramento at 31.7% this December. 1 year ago in December 2021, the ratio was 67.1%. Huge changes in our housing market, to say the least. And by the way, the national average is at 42% according to Redfin. 1 year ago, it was about 68%. In regards to home purchase cancellations, Jacksonville, Florida led the nation, at least amongst 50 most populous U.S. metros that Redfin tracked. The ratio here is at 25.6% of all pending home sales fell out of contract. This means that approximately 1 in every 5 pending home sales fell out of contract in Jacksonville, Florida, compared to 19.2% 12 months ago. Atlanta, Georgia actually had the second highest rate at 23.4%, followed by Fort Lauderdale, Florida at 21%, Tampa at 21%, also at 21% in Houston. Where else here? Dallas, Texas at 20%, Riverside, California also at 20%, Denver at 19%, Phoenix, Arizona at a 19% cancellation rate, Las Vegas also at 19%. Where's Sacramento? Yeah, Sacramento is at 17.2%. Last year it was only 14.2%. Also interesting to see here that Austin, Texas, the share of people canceling their contracts was only 16% this last December. 1 year ago, it was about 13%. And again, the national average for buyers backing out of deals was 16.5% this December. In December 2021, that ratio was about 12.8%. And with that said, please comment below your biggest takeaways from today's video. Also, if you guys got any value in this video whatsoever, then please hit the like button. I really appreciate that. Of course, I appreciate you. Hope you have an awesome day and look forward to seeing you on the next video.